The Lindsay Clancy timeline is raising a lot of questions, so let's go over it. The Lindsay Clancy trial is not about whether Lindsay killed her 3 children. Her defense does not dispute that she did. The question is whether Lindsay was legally criminally responsible when 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Callan were killed inside of their Duxbury, Massachusetts home on January 24th, 2023. The prosecution says that Lindsay was rational, deliberate, and methodical. They believe that she created an excuse to send her husband Patrick away from the house, calculated how long he would be gone, killed the children, crushed medication, cut herself, and then went through a second-story window head first. The defense says that Lindsay was experiencing postpartum psychosis, extreme sleep deprivation, and a mental health crisis made worse by months of changing psychiatric medications. To understand this, we need to go several months back. Callan was born in May 2022, and Patrick said that Lindsay initially appeared happy and functioning normally, but after the fall, her mental health had noticeably declined. She was anxious about returning to work as a labor and delivery nurse. She became increasingly focused on whether she was sleeping enough. Patrick described a period when she reportedly went close to 48 hours without meaningful sleep. She began receiving psychiatric treatment and was prescribed Zoloft. Over the following months, doctors and nurse practitioners prescribed a rotating list of medications that reportedly included Zoloft, Prozac, Ambien, Remeron, Klonopin, Seroquel, Valium, Lamictal, and Trazodone. You will often hear that Lindsay was taking 13 to 15 medications, but that requires some explanation. Those medications were prescribed over several months, and Patrick testified that Lindsay was normally taking 2 or 3 medications at a time, not every medication simultaneously. Some were stopped, replaced, tapered, or changed because they weren't helping. But even Patrick admitted that he wasn't closely tracking how many pills she took from each bottle. He said that he wasn't always with her when she took them and did not count the pills himself and didn't know that some bottles contained far more medication than expected. According to Patrick, Lindsay continued to get worse. Her journals described severe anxiety, guilt, insomnia, emotional disconnection, and feeling as though she was drowning every day. She wrote about wanting to die and feeling traumatized by the process of sleep training Callan. By December, Patrick says that Lindsay disclosed thoughts involving harming herself or the children. So Patrick asked whether she needed to be kept away from them, and she reportedly told him no. He said that it was confusing because she could describe a disturbing thought and then immediately continue making the children lunch, putting them to bed, or caring for them normally. He said he never personally saw Lindsay physically harm the children. Around New Year's Eve, Lindsay voluntarily admitted herself into McLean Hospital. She remained there for several days and was discharged in early January. After she returned home, Patrick said that she appeared significantly better. The family went to a museum, they went to a water park. She took care of the children, attended appointments, and appeared normal to friends, teachers, and the family's nanny and other people who saw her. Now, the defense will argue that psychosis can fluctuate and that someone may appear organized during certain periods while still experiencing severe psychiatric symptoms. The prosecution will argue that all of this shows Lindsay was functioning rationally. Then we reach January 24th. At approximately 8 that morning, Lindsay took Cora to a pediatric appointment while Patrick stayed home with Dawson and Callan. At 8:17, Patrick sent Lindsay a picture of Dawson, who had apparently dressed himself and was proudly showing off his outfit. At 8:18, Lindsay sent Patrick a picture of Cora at the doctor's office. That pediatrician has now testified that Lindsay behaved appropriately and that nothing about the appointment appeared unusual. Lindsay and Cora returned home, and later, Lindsay took the children outside, played in the snow, and sent pictures of them with a snowman. Patrick described January 24th as one of Lindsay's best days in months. And that description matters because within hours, all 3 children would be found unresponsive in the basement. At approximately 4:02 p.m., digital evidence reportedly showed a search for children's Miralax. At 4:13, someone looked up the 3V restaurant. Apple Maps was then reportedly used to examine the route between the Clancy home and the restaurant. This is one of the prosecution's primary pieces of evidence for planning. They argue that Lindsay looked up the route because she wanted to know how long Patrick would be away from the home. But the search doesn't literally say how much time will I have alone. It's a direction search to a restaurant where the family was ordering dinner. The idea that Lindsay used it to calculate a murder window is the prosecution's interpretation based on what happened afterward. At approximately 4:47, Lindsay called CVS to ask about a constipation product for Cora. The employee who spoke to her reportedly did not hear slurred speech or anything obviously unusual. Shortly before 5, Lindsay texted Patrick asking whether he wanted takeout from 3V because she had not cooked and had experienced a long day. They discussed their orders. Lindsay ordered a Mediterranean-style bowl for herself, and Patrick ordered a scallop and pork belly risotto. At approximately 5:10, Lindsay called the restaurant and placed the order. Around the same time, she asked Patrick to stop at CVS and purchase a stool softener for Cora. At approximately 5:15, Patrick prepared to leave. He testified that he rocked Callan, kissed Cora, and told the children that he would be right back. Dawson was reportedly eating chicken nuggets. Patrick said that Lindsay was standing near the basement doorway holding Callan when he left. That detail stands out because the children were later found in the basement. At 5:32, surveillance footage placed Patrick inside CVS. At 5:33, Patrick called Lindsay because the exact medication that she requested was unavailable. She does not answer that call, but a minute later at 5:34, she calls him back. The phone call lasted approximately 14 seconds. Patrick said that Lindsay sounded coherent, and he also described her as sounding quiet or like she may have been in the middle of something. That 14-second phone call may be one of the most important moments in the entire timeline. Because we still do not publicly know whether the children were attacked before that call, after the call, or during. At 5:37, Patrick completed his CVS purchase and left. At 5:54, surveillance footage showed him entering 3V to collect the food, then he drove home. Shortly after 6, Patrick entered the house and immediately noticed something was wrong. The house was silent. He didn't hear Lindsay. He didn't hear any of the children. 6:09, Patrick called Lindsay's cell phone from inside of the home and she didn't answer. He went upstairs, found the primary bedroom door locked, and used an emergency key to open it. Inside, he finds a knife on the nightstand, the open window, and what he describes as blood everywhere. Above my head is that nightstand. Right here is the bed that was physically moved away from the window so that it could be opened. He looked outside and saw Lindsay lying on the ground below the second-story window. So he runs outside. He testified that Lindsay told him she had tried to kill herself. Approximately 6:11, authorities received the 911 call. At some point, Lindsay reportedly tells him that the children were in the basement. Patrick went into the basement and found Cora, Dawson, and Callan unconscious with exercise bands around their necks. He removed the bands and attempted CPR while screaming for help. First responders arrived and continued the life-saving efforts. Cora and Dawson died that night. However, Callan was initially resuscitated and transferred to Boston Children's Hospital, but he suffered catastrophic brain damage and died several days later. Lindsay survived, but the fall caused devastating injuries to her spine. She is now paralyzed and has to use a wheelchair. Now we need to examine the physical evidence because this is where the case becomes more complicated. Investigators examined the 3 exercise bands. They were unable to recover usable fingerprints from any of them. That doesn't necessarily mean that the bands were wiped clean. Exercise bands are flexible, textured objects that may not preserve fingerprints well. It means there is no identifiable fingerprint placing Lindsay's hand, Patrick's hand, or anyone else's hand on those bands during the killings. DNA evidence is also not as simple as people online have made it sound. Both sides stipulated that DNA from all 5 members of the Clancy household was present in a mixture found on part of one blue exercise band. That included Patrick, Lindsay, and all 3 children. Other portions of the bands contained strong DNA associations with the children. Because the exercise bands were kept in a family home, mixed household DNA is not automatically surprising. I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to record a part 2 right now. Go check it out.